Hey, everybody. I am Professor Doug Miller, and I am joining you from my home in Stillwater, Oklahoma, where I teach history at Oklahoma State University to discuss my new book, Washita Love Child: The Rise of Indigenous Rock Star Jesse Ed Davis. I appreciate this invitation from the Boulder Bookstore in Boulder, Colorado, to talk about my new book, which is on their shelves. And I'm a big fan of the Boulder Bookstore. I always have to visit there every time I'm in town. And I once said to my wife, "Man, I want to write a book that will be in the Boulder Bookstore." And that happened. So thank you so much, Stephanie, and all the good folks there that gave me the opportunity to do this. Um, my book, Washita Love Child, is about Jesse Ed Davis, a Native American musician from Oklahoma who moved to Hollywood in the late 1960s to attempt a career in the music business, and he succeeded. He ended up playing on many of the biggest albums and stages of his time for the better part of 20 years, appearing with Bob Dylan and Taj Mahal, George Harrison, John Lennon, all kinds of great artists from his time and place in country music, rock and roll, jazz, pop, and beyond, culminating with a collaboration with a fellow Native American artist, a Dakota person named John Trudell, with whom Jesse Ed Davis created what I suggest in the book is sort of a new kind of indigenous rock music that they made together shortly before Jesse's passing in 1988. So the inspiration for my book was Jesse's music, essentially. I have been listening to Jesse Ed Davis my entire life, really, going back to when I was a little kid, listening to a cassette copy of my mom and dad's Jackson Browne album, the first Jackson Browne solo album that features Jesse Ed Davis on Jackson's first top 10 hit, Doctor My Eyes, including Jesse's sort of iconic guitar solo within the classic rock canon. And as his name just continued appearing throughout my record collection, I always wanted to know more about him, but I never really read much or heard much about him. Fast forward to 2016, 2017 or so, I was listening to a Gene Clark album that Jesse Davis produced, an album called White Light. And that's when the moment really struck me that maybe I'll attempt a book on Jesse Ed Davis at some point. After my first book came out in 2019, the COVID pandemic was soon upon us, and I thought that was the right time to try to do a book about Jesse Ed Davis, and I did. It worked. Here it is. Um, for in terms of making the book, where research is concerned, was concerned, there wasn't much out there. In fact, at the early stage, I wasn't sure I could actually make a book about Jesse Davis, and others worried that it wouldn't be possible either, simply because there are no sort of obvious archival materials. There is no Jesse Davis manuscript collection held in some library somewhere. I can let me see the Jesse Davis papers. There's no such thing. So I had to be creative to first make an archive before I could make the book. And I realized that the material is carried by people who knew Jesse, his friends, family, and music collaborators. And I conducted over 120 interviews with people from those different backgrounds and gathered different dimensions of his story, different sort of, experiences and reflections and chapters, and put it all together to make the story now available in the book. So I interviewed Jesse's family members, his close friends, and some of his great music partners, who are some of my great music inspirations throughout my life. So It was a lot of fun working on the book in that respect. I also interpreted Jesse's music as a primary source into itself, both the actual recorded music, listening to the music, I'm sort of reading the music through an audio experience and discerning clues and insights, but also actually reading the physical albums themselves, right down to seeing the liner notes as roadmaps to Jesse's life and experiences, and sort of putting connections together through the constellation of information available, both within the record grooves and within the record album jackets and more. Um, Finally, I was very fortunate to receive a sort of private collection of material about Jesse Davis and directly created by Jesse Davis from a person named Bill Noriega, whom Jesse Davis raised as his own son, beginning when Bill was one. And Bill gave me his material to support the book, and I'm absolutely grateful. I couldn't have made the book that I did without Bill's support. So thank you, Bill. If you want to check out Jesse Davis, there's so much. He once said my discography would be as long as my arm, probably. And he wasn't kidding. He contributed to roughly 100 albums. He's on dozens of top 10, top 20, and top 40 albums and singles. There's a sort of whole ocean of music to which Jesse Ed Davis contributed. And I love his work with Gene Clark, who was a former member of the Byrds when he started working with Jesse. I mentioned that already, the White Light album, the No Other album. I love Jesse's work with Taj Mahal. The first three Taj Mahal albums are classics in the blues rock canon. And I love Jesse's work with some of Jesse's favorite blues artists like B.B. King, John Lee Hooker, Lightnin' Hopkins, Albert King, Albert Cowlins. Those were Jesse's heroes, and he got to play with all of them. And so I always think it's really cool to listen to those records and kind of hear Jesse making his dreams come true. Books I've read recently that I love. I got a few. John Swed's Cosmic Scholar about the life and times of Harry Smith, the folklorist, ethnographer, avant-garde filmmaker, multimedia artist, just a really intriguing character. I have always wondered about Harry Smith, a very mysterious figure. If you get into American folk music, at some point you'll learn something about Harry Smith, or at least see his name. And I wondered if the book would be similar to my book about Jesse, in that it's a difficult subject and a somewhat obscure subject whose importance sort of transcended public knowledge about them. And the book is similar to Washita Love Child, and I really enjoyed reading it, feeling like I was maybe going through some of the same experiences as this particular author. I also recently read The Rest is Noise, Listening to the 20th Century by Alex Ross. I teach a course at Oklahoma State University called U.S. History Through Popular and Unpopular Music. So I'm always reading different material to inform my thinking and instruction in that class. And I wanted to learn more about classical music, especially at the turn of the century. And this book is excellent on that subject. And finally, our son Kit and I recently finished The Phantom Toll Booth, the classic book by Norton Juster that I read when I was a kid. And I recently saw this in a bookstore and thought, oh, I think Kit will love this. Kit loves, he has a very literary mind. His mother and I read to him all the time, and Kit reads all the time, day and night. And we loved reading this together. In fact, I miss reading this together. It was a really great experience. Um, to conclude, the Boulder Bookstore asked me to read an excerpt from my book about Jesse Davis, and I'll do that now. Okay? The Madison Square Garden house lights are dimmed for sound check. While exhaling his own puff, platinum blonde Leon Russell, the rollicking musician from Oklahoma, leans in to light the former Beatle George Harrison's smoke with a fading match. Fire catches. And then George, strapped into a cherry red Les Paul, turns to his left, releases his own toke, and sparks Jesse Ed Davis's Winston, with a lighter George had been holding the entire time. Practically a comedy routine, it's more an expression of the camaraderie these musicians enjoyed when playing together. They were all quick with an assist. Jesse Ed Davis, the Kiowa, Comanche, Cheyenne, Seminole, and Muskogee guitarist from Oklahoma, sports a white t-shirt overlaid with a sleeveless denim cowboy shirt draped under his long black hair. He had initially been invited to fill the big shoes of an ailing Eric Clapton, who made the gig in the nick of time. With showtime rapidly approaching, Jesse had just emerged from a hotel room where he had received a crash course in the set list from bass guitarist Klaus Vormann. He was easygoing, fantastic, Vormann tells me. Extending a flame to Jesse was now the least George could do. This wasn't just any gig. Beer and Coke cans crowned an assortment of keyboards, pianos, and amplifiers arranged haphazardly across the stage, waiting to blast the sounds of the greatest concert of the decade, George Harrison's 1971 concert for Bangladesh. That night, Leon, George, Jesse, Klaus, Clapton, and others performed some of the most beloved music of the era. Jim Keltner, who formed a drum duo with Ringo during the concert, remembers the center of their big sound. It was the Jesse Ed groove. George took to the stage and launched straight into Wah Wah, an exasperated tune about his relentlessly overshadowing former group. In a regal white suit, holding a weary white Stratocaster, this was George's first live appearance since the Beatles quit the road in 1966. Jesse marveled at the opportunity to appear on stage with George and Ringo. "I love the Beatles," he said. "They meant a lot to me." Basking in George's rare appearance, many in the crowd also wondered if the rumors were true that Bob Dylan would make a surprise appearance. Fresh from cutting Watching the River Flow and When I Paint My Masterpiece with Leon Russell and Jesse Ed Davis, Dylan too had rarely appeared live since 1966, when so-called fans called him Judas for betraying his folk music roots. This was a big band and a big moment on a big stage, the first big concert event for a humanitarian cause. It prefigured Farm Aid, Live Aid, Live 8, USA for Africa, and other massive music benefit endeavors across subsequent decades. "I thought it was going to be a catastrophe," Jesse recalled. Everyone exhaled when Dylan finally strode on stage with an acoustic guitar and harmonica. The concert was not a catastrophe. The large ensemble from around the world prevailed. And Jesse, now donning a blazer and flares, eyes closed, grooving with his signature Telecaster guitar, fit right in, radiating confidence and exhilaration, forming their rhythmic core. In his description of the event, he was almost someone else that night, floating above the stage in an out-of-body experience like a dream. Just the opportunity to play with these people was enough, he suggested. But to play together for the purpose that we were doing, I thought was probably one of the highest points of my career. Musical, emotional, spiritual, you name it. It had only been 5 years since Jesse first raced along Route 66, all the way to California, hoping to break into the Hollywood music business. And the Bangladesh concert now marked his arrival. 15 years removed from his initial career crest as one of the most coveted guitarists in popular music, Jesse had been rolling in a drowning Pacific wave of drug dependence. Now he was coming back to shore. "I'm Jesse Ed Davis, and I'm real proud to be an Indian. This is something I hope that doesn't go by you," he declared one night at LA's Palomino Club with Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Taj Mahal, John Trudell, and the graffiti band gathered in support. That Jesse affirmed his indigenous pride, indicated his determination to make his experience as an indigenous person a fundamental aspect of his reintroduction to music audiences. Just over 1 year later, his extraordinary life and career ended in tragedy in a Los Angeles laundry room. That fact has made it difficult to prevent his death from becoming the story of his life. But while his death was indeed a tragedy, his life surely was not. Thank you for listening to some material from my book, Washita Love Child. I hope that you'll pick up a copy and give it a read, and that you'll be just as surprised by the depth and richness and complexity and importance of Jessia Davis's story as I remain today. Thank you so much.